Hello there. A subject that's been brought up several times in the comments section is the idea of a padded garment being worn underneath the wooden slat armor. Now, the illustration doesn't show what's worn underneath the armor, and I haven't been able to find anything written on the subject. But the idea makes a lot of sense to me, so I decided I would make a speculative recreation. But before I talk about my recreation, I'd like to go over my reference material. To begin with, we have the armors of the Pacific Northwest. Oftentimes these consisted of a slat armor breastplate worn over heavy hide armor. These hide armors were generally constructed from multiple layers of some thick hide like moose skin, which wrapped around the body in a single piece on the left side and then was fastened with toggles on the right side. Some of them had toggles to connect the right shoulder. Most of them were 2 layers thick, but some of them were only 1 and some of them were more than 2. Another potential candidate are the war shirts of the Plains peoples. These are made from a single layer of elk hide. They're designed to hang very loosely around the body and catch and turn incoming points. Not a perfect reference, but I could buy these being used as under armor. And they have the advantage of being geographically a heck of a lot closer than the West Coast. I want to briefly mention the sand reinforced armor. I don't think the sand armor is a likely candidate for under armor. It's a little bit too heavy and rigid for those purposes. It would be a little bit like wearing a brigandine under a coat of plates. Also, I just want to showcase this picture. It's a hide painting of 2 armored warriors. They look cool as heck. So here's my recreation. As you can see, I've drawn most of my inspiration from the Pacific Northwest. It's sort of a baggy, sleeveless tunic. It's made from a single layer of buffalo skin. 2 layers would have been better, but I'm not willing to waste that much buffalo skin on what is essentially a novelty. I'm wearing it over a thin deerskin shirt. As you can see, the front and back are made from the same piece. There is no seam on the left side. The left side is the side that is exposed when you draw a bow, so you understandably don't want an opening there. The right side on most of the Northwest examples are secured only by a couple of toggles. However, their style of slat armor covers the sides of the body, whereas my example may or may not. Because of this, instead of toggles, I decided to sew up the whole side with leather cord. This necessitated making the whole thing a little bit more bulky and less form-fitting than I would have liked. But if I do it up with a belt, it looks more or less like a normal tunic. There. A little bit less like a leather sack that I threw over my head. It's also got a slightly raised section to guard the neck. It does up at the right shoulder with a pair of antler toggles. This allows me to get my head and my arm into it while at the same time keeping the neck hole relatively small. When worn with the slat armor, it goes some ways towards protecting the main vulnerabilities of the neck, the collar, and the sides. As mentioned, this is of particular importance when drawing a bow. There almost certainly should be a side panel there. In previous test videos, I've had some people ask about why I didn't test against blunt force. This is how you test blunt force. This is also the reason why I didn't film it before. It looks kind of stupid, doesn't it? The strongest of these blows feels like an open palm slap in normal clothing, and not a particularly strong slap at that. Realistically speaking, though, the armor should probably have 2 layers. A real warrior wouldn't cheap out on the buffalo hide. So here I've got a heavy moose hide coat underneath it. Now, short of breaking bones, you can't really simulate blunt force in a synthetic target. You just have to take me at my word as to how little or how much this hurts. I can feel the blows, but there's no pain whatsoever. All of the sharp part of the impact has been taken out of it. I'll be the first to admit that the blows are coming from an awkward angle, but as far as I'm concerned, the 2 armors work together really well. Let's see how the 2 layers do without the wood over top. The way you do this is you start out with weak blows and then you move up until it gets painful. I can tell you that the 2 layers by themselves would stop a lot of bruising, but if a blow was going to break a bone, the 2 layers probably wouldn't stop it. A single layer with nothing underneath would only stop light bruising. Leather protects you against blunt force differently than padded cloth. Where the cloth compresses, leather absorbs the force through weight, it distributes it a little bit because of its density, and because air can't force its way through the leather, part of the force of a blow goes to squishing the air out through the arm and neck holes. I wouldn't want to rely on something like this as a standalone armor. Alone, it doesn't really compete with the slat armor. I could, however, see it being used by skirmishers. The slat armor is a little bit heavy and it impedes your movement and your running a little bit. This doesn't weigh too much and it doesn't interfere with your movement. It won't protect you from everything, but it will stop some arrows and some blows. You'd also be a lot less likely to overheat when doing a lot of running. In conclusion, I think that something similar to this was likely worn underneath Iroquois and slat armor. It might, however, have looked completely different. I don't know. I hope you found this mildly interesting. Whatever the case, thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.